Hey there, internets. So, kind of a delayed video, kind of midweek, but I wanted to get this out. My wife and I, Sunday night, went and saw The Sound of Freedom. It's a good movie. Go see it if you have not. I wanted to express a few thoughts on it. It is very intense. My wife was crying. She could handle it. She doesn't handle a lot of high stimulation stuff, but the subject matter was intense. But it's an important message, a good message, and I'm sure they took some liberties with it. Anything where you're condensing what was a large operation like that down to 2 hours, you're going to take some liberties. But a few thoughts to this other thing is the mainstream medias wanted to call it QAnon or QAnon adjacent and imply that there's a bunch of conspiracy theory stuff. Look, human trafficking happens around the world, everywhere in some form. I do videos, I have to watch videos, training videos at work about how to recognize human trafficking and then report suspected human trafficking. So this is not something that's just made up out of thin air to generate politics. Sadly, I was surprised when a former teacher of mine let me know he was going to go see it, and someone got all bent out of shape over because Jim Caviezel's in it. Well, if I got rid of every piece of entertainment because I didn't like the politics, or thought that a celebrity did something stupid, or said something I didn't like, or did something I didn't like, I would have like 3 zombie movies left in my DVD collection, if that. Because there wouldn't be much. So I'm going to say you shouldn't let the messenger color your opinion of the message. And we have to understand where this goes. It may have even had an impact, because I'll be honest about it, if not for it being not put out, whether it was simply when Disney bought Fox, they didn't think it would do well and they let it go. They didn't want to put the effort into releasing it. That's the simplest thing. I don't think it's necessarily a big conspiracy. I mean, air conditioning units go out. Sometimes you hear the same story 5 times. You think it's multiple times. It was on a limited release and it did amazingly well. In the grand scheme of blockbusters, $100 million is not much these days. But when you're beating out the expected blockbuster of the last Indiana Jones movie, that's saying something. It has probably already had an impact. California, their Democrat-run assembly rejected a bill to add to their 3 strikes law human trafficking. The outrage that came from that may have been helped to be generated by that movie. So, guess what? Now those Democrats that voted against it are scrambling to change their votes, bring it up again, and pass it. They can't do it fast enough, because they've basically been asked, why would you object to it? This is why the Trump administration was separating when people would come across the border with children, especially if they seemed likely they weren't theirs. And spoiler alert, the first child rescued is at the border with somebody who comes, oh, well, it's my nephew, and they're looking at his passport, the supposed passport, and they says, well, kids these days, they grow up so fast. And they're looking at it, looking at the kid, looking at the passport. That's why they were separating them, to figure out, is this really the kid's uncle? Is this really the kid's dad? Is this really his much older brother? That's what they were trying to do. And sometimes they were seeing the same kid repeatedly before they did it. So that's why they were doing that. I saw a headline for an article saying they found a ship with kids being smuggled on it. Smuggling happens in different ways, different places. I saw an article that something like 400,000 people are enslaved in Eritrea, Eritrea. We need to stop pretending that this doesn't happen. And we shouldn't be opposing it just because you don't like the messenger. But honestly, I think a lot of it's just being opposed out of tribalism. If the Republicans say we need to do something about human trafficking, Democrats are going to say it ain't a big deal. And the Democrats, Biden administration has said international human trafficking is no longer an area of concern. They took it off. Think about that in terms of that. If you see that movie and you're, especially if you're not necessarily committed to a candidate, and you might want to think about that the Democrats removed human trafficking as being an area of concern. So, anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts. Go see the movie. If you are conservative and you don't, even if you don't really, it's not your thing. It's not my usual fare. For when it comes to movies, go see it anyway. You know, I went and saw the God's Not Dead movies, not because they were cinematic masterpieces, because they weren't, but because I wanted to show support for conservative media appearing in theaters. We talk about you listen to Tim Pool on his program, and he talks about making culture. Well, that's part of what this is, even if it's based on a true story. Making movies, television. We need to have our own comic books, even though that seems like a kid's thing. Adults like them too. We need our own graphic novels. We need our own entertainments. And it just starts with a few of these things. And then we need to support them. If you want to see media like that made, honestly, even if it wasn't based on a true story, it is a good movie. And when you talk about the culture war, that's the kind of thing that's at. You want to see those kind of movies made, you got to watch them. And anyway, until then, like, share, subscribe, and go see that movie. Yeah, you all take care.